Hi, my name is Jen Rhodes with the SLO County Behavioral Health Department. Thank you for joining this training on youth substance use. I have worked in behavioral health prevention and outreach for almost 20 years in both school and community-based programs. I am currently the coordinator of the SLO Opioid Safety Coalition, which has been active here in SLO County since 2016. Our goals for this presentation are to learn about the substances that are most commonly used by youth, understand the impacts of substance use on youth, recognize the risk factors or signs of a person using, learn how to talk with your kids about substance use, learn how to recognize and respond to an opioid overdose, and connect with resources. To start off, the substances most commonly used by youth to get high are alcohol, vaping of both nicotine and THC products, cannabis, and pills. I'm going to share some easy facts about each of these substances that you can use to broaden your own knowledge, but also to help your young people have factual information that will help them to make positive and healthy choices when it comes to substance use. Alcohol is the most commonly used substance among young people, and adults for that matter. Alcohol is a depressant, meaning that it slows down our body's processes. Things like coordination, speech, reaction times, and critical thinking are all impacted by alcohol use. What's really important to understand about alcohol is how it works in the body and how much is actually in a drink. Alcohol can come in many different forms, but our bodies break down alcohol the same way, about 1 drink per hour. If you look at the graphic on the right, you can see how we quantify 1 drink of alcohol. It is 12 ounces of a 5% beer is equal to about 5 ounces of 12% wine, which is equal to 1.5 ounces or a shot of 80 proof liquor. So 1 standard drink is 0.6 fluid ounces of 100% alcohol. And so those are the equivalencies there. If you think about what it looks like in a red Solo cup, the little lines on there, you can see the lowest one is, 1 ounce of liquor. The 5 ounces of wine would be that kind of first third line. And then the next line would be 8 ounces of malt liquor. So that would be like a malt, a beer or something like that. And then the top line is 12 ounces of beer. So you can use this guide to help you think about, if you're consuming mixed drinks, how much alcohol is in that 1 glass. So for instance, 1 margarita might have 2 shots of tequila in it. So it's in 1 glass, but it would actually be 2 drinks. So really important to kind of think about how much somebody is drinking in terms of how much actual alcohol is in the drink versus, how many containers they're consuming. The term binge drinking refers to consuming 5 or more of these drinks in a setting, and it's often associated with negative impacts of alcohol use like drinking and driving, alcohol poisoning, and other risky behaviors. So binge drinking is really what we are most concerned with as far as young people and drinking alcohol. So the next common substances that young people are using is vaping or using e-cigarettes and cannabis use. So vaping or e-cigarettes are marketed as a healthy alternative to smoking. Over the years, it has become popular among young people in particular, due in part to the variety of flavors vapes come in. So what are they? E-cigarettes are electronic devices that essentially heat a liquid, which is typically going to have nicotine or in some cases THC in it. And that produces an aerosol, which is a mix of small particles in the air. And that's how you get the substance into, into your lungs and throughout your body. E-cigarettes can come in many shapes and sizes, as you can see on the screen. Most of them are going to contain a battery, a heating element, a place to hold a liquid. Again, that liquid is going to have nicotine, but it can also be THC. And some are disposable, some are reusable, rechargeable, refillable. They come in a lot of different forms, flavors, and concentrations of nicotine. And oftentimes the concentration is higher than in what you would think of a typical cigarette. So one vape or one e-cigarette could be the equivalent of smoking 6 or 7 typical cigarettes. So important to kind of understand, again, like alcohol, it's not necessarily how many packages you're consuming, but what is actually in those packages is what matters in terms of your exposure to the substance. Cannabis or marijuana or weed has two main components. The first is CBD, which is the non-psychoactive component. We've been hearing lots, socially and in the news about CBD's, potential benefits for, health or medical related issues. So this is the part that's used medicinally. CBD itself does not produce a high effect. The other primary component in cannabis is THC, and that is the component that has that psychoactive high effect. And kind of like what we've seen with the vaping and the e-cigarettes, a lot of cannabis products nowadays have varying levels of THC and CBD in them to create different effects on the body. With cannabis, there's many ways to use this particular substance. People can smoke it like in a joint or using a bong. They can vape it, like I mentioned earlier. It can be put in edibles, so things like little gummies or candies or baked goods. It can be in tinctures, which are like little oils that somebody might take drops of orally. And then it can also be used in dabbing, which is essentially a THC concentrate. So it's super strong, and that can be popular among young people as well. So lots of different ways that that people can use cannabis products. The last category of commonly used substances among young people is prescription pills and medicine. So when we're talking about, young people and substance use for the purposes of this presentation, we're going to be referring to this pills and medicine use in terms of misuse. So misuse would include a person using a prescription, maybe not how it was prescribed to them, meaning they might take more of it than is prescribed, take it more often, or maybe take it in conjunction with another medication that was not kind of part of the doctor's orders. Misuse can also include taking a medication that's not prescribed to them. Maybe it's borrowing a friend's prescription or, getting it from a parent or a grandparent or something like that. So both of those ways of misuse can lead to some negative consequences and be rather dangerous. And so we want to avoid that. Why we want to avoid that is that prescription drugs are strong medications. They are prescribed by a doctor. And when your doctor prescribes you a medication, they're thinking about, what they need to help with. Maybe it's pain or anxiety or other mental health struggles, or maybe it's ADHD. But they're thinking about the issue that you are having as a person. They're thinking about, your size, your body composition, other medications they know you're taking, other kind of important factors about your body. And that all goes into how they make that prescription and what instructions they give you. And so while these medications are helpful and safe when taken as prescribed and under the care of the doctor, they can be misused and become dangerous pretty easily. So one way to prevent harm from medicine misuse is to practice medicine safety. this is important even for over-the-counter medications like Tylenol or cold or allergy medication. So some tips are to make sure you store all medicine up and away from young people, or maybe people who who you don't want to have access to that medication, or people that don't maybe understand how to follow the dosage instructions, etc. You might also consider locking medications if that's appropriate for your home. When giving medicine to kids, you never want to refer to it as candy. You want kids to understand that medicine is for a purpose. It's to be given to them by their doctor or their parent. You don't want to make it seem like it's like a fun, exciting thing, because we don't want a child to kind of innocently seek out medicine on their own, and then get sick from that, or have to go to the hospital for medicine poisoning or anything like that. You also want to pay attention to supply, especially with your prescriptions. So if you notice you're needing refills more frequently, for example, that could indicate that someone's using more than prescribed. Well, if you have older kids, teach them how to read the dosage instructions. Have a schedule of when to take regular medications, and then make sure you're disposing of unused and expired medications regularly. It's a good idea to go through your medicine cabinet every 6 months, every year. All of our local pharmacies here in SLO County offer free anonymous disposal. So it's really easy nowadays to have a safe, free, and confidential way to make sure that you get these unused or expired medications out of your home to ensure the safety of everybody in your house. The prescription drugs that are commonly misused are going to be opioid pain medications. So these are things like oxys and hydrocodone. Depressants or benzodiazepine medications. So these are things that might help a person with anxiety or sleep. So examples of these are Xanax and Valium and Ativan. And then finally, stimulant-based medications like those for treating ADHD, so things like Adderall and Ritalin. If you or a family member has prescriptions, in these categories, just a good idea to be aware of kind of keeping track of those medications and making sure that they are stored safely and they're not getting into the hands of somebody that could be hurt by them. So we don't want that to happen. And so just as a reminder, what we always tell, people, especially young people, if a medication did not come in a, bottle from the pharmacy with your name on it, you don't want to be taking it. You want to consult your doctor for all of your medication needs. So one of the reasons we want to ensure medicine safety is due to the high likelihood of addiction and dependence to opioids, which are painkillers and can come in both prescription pills and also illicit forms like heroin and fentanyl. Opioids can come in powder, liquid, or pill form, and can be naturally derived, like from the opium poppy plant. These are things like morphine and codeine. Others are semi-synthetic, meaning they're made in labs by chemically processing these natural opioids. So semi-synthetic opioids are things like heroin and a lot of the prescription pain medications that we're pretty familiar with. Opioids can also be made entirely in a lab with no natural ingredients. Fentanyl is an example of one of these fully synthetic opioids. All opioids have a high chance of tolerance and addiction. How that works is all opioids, regardless of how they're made or what form they come in, are going to activate opioid receptors in our body to block the pain messages between the brain and the body. So let's say you have a broken leg and the doctor prescribes some opioid medication. That medication, once it gets to work in your body, is basically going to cut off the communication between the nerves in your leg and the part of your brain that recognizes pain. In doing so, opioids also produce a euphoric or high effect. The reason of this is that they work similarly to endorphins in our body. If you've ever had the experience of exercising, going for a run, and then you feel great afterwards, you have no pain, that's the effect of endorphins on the body. So maybe you've heard of the term the runner's high. That's essentially what opioids are mimicking, except on a exponentially greater level. Endorphins are naturally produced and are not harmful to the body. The trouble with opioids is that they aren't naturally produced. Their effect on the body is going to be exponentially stronger than endorphins because they're much stronger acting than our natural endorphins are. And that's what can lead to dependence and addiction. Fentanyl is an opioid, like I mentioned earlier, and it is really the driving force behind the current opioid crisis. It's associated with 2/3 of all overdose deaths in SLO County. It is 50 times stronger than heroin and 100 times stronger than morphine. It's an incredibly potent substance. It only takes a tiny amount of fentanyl, 2 milligrams, to cause a fatal overdose. The picture on the bottom of the screen with the pencil and the white powdery substance on it, that is showing what 2 milligrams of powdered fentanyl looks like, and it fits on the tip of a pencil. It is such a small amount that can cause a great deal of harm to the average person. There's both pharmaceutical and illicit fentanyl, although the vast majority of issues associated with fentanyl is the illicit kind. Pharmaceutical fentanyl is going to be used in a controlled medical environment, like in a hospital or under the supervision of hospice for end-of-life care. Fentanyl is cheap and easy to make. That's part of why we're talking about, the fact that it's fully synthetic. A drug manufacturer does not have to source a natural ingredient, wait for something to grow. As long as they have access to the chemicals needed to make fentanyl, it's pretty easy to make as much as they want. And so, as with a lot of other products, when we have kind of an unlimited supply of the products it takes to make it, then that product can then be made and kept much cheaper than something that has a finite amount of resources to make it. So because it's cheap and easy to make, and because it is so potent and so strong, fentanyl is commonly added to other illicit drugs. This could be heroin, meth, cocaine, and counterfeit pills. Counterfeit or fake pills are becoming more common and are the primary way young people are having accidental exposure to fentanyl. Illicit drug makers have figured out that prescription pills are popular and nowadays pretty difficult to get. So they started to make them by putting whatever drug, filler, and color they want, then using a pill press to make it look like any number of popular prescription pills like Oxy, Adderall, or Xanax. These photos are from the DEA's One Pill Can Kill website, and they depict actual pills the DEA has seized during operations here in the United States. The pills on top are real pharmaceutical pills, and the ones below are their fake versions. They are almost identical in size, shape, imprint, and would be practically impossible to tell them apart. The hidden difference is that, on average, half of all fake pills seized by the DEA contain a lethal dose of fentanyl. There is no way to tell by look, smell, or taste if a pill is fake or not. So if you didn't get it from a pharmacist, please do not trust it. Counterfeit pills and other illegal substances are often sold on social media, making them available to literally anybody with a smartphone. Drug traffickers are on many of these social media sites, advertising and connecting with potential buyers. Once a connection is made, the buyer uses a payment app to pay, and then all they need to do is set up a time to exchange the substance. This technology has really changed the landscape of what a drug deal looks like. It's taken out a lot of the scary or dangerous appearance of it and kind of makes it feel almost harmless when somebody is getting something that can be very harmful and even fatal. Anytime our perception of something being harmful goes down, typically we see use going up. And that's a dangerous spot that we're in right now, especially with with young people, with fentanyl, with social media and other apps that kind of have that disappearing messaging function. So what do we do about it? Some tips for parents and caregivers are know what apps your child has on their phone if they have a phone, and make sure to talk with them about app safety. Want to make sure they're only talking to people they know in real life, that they're not arranging meetups with people without you knowing, things like this. You want to pay extra attention to apps like Snapchat and WhatsApp with kind of hidden and disappearing messages. Talk with other parents about this. It can be helpful if all the parents in a child's friend group are on the same or similar page. So here are some impacts of substance use on youth. Number one, we're going to be looking at school trouble. Substance use affects a person's memory, concentration, and motivation for school, sports, or other things they might enjoy. So if you see some of those things changing in your child, that might be an indication that you might want to look deeper into why that's going on. Substance use can also increase risky behavior. Drug use makes it harder to control your body and thinking, and it often causes people to do things they wouldn't normally do. Of course, legal trouble is a big concern with any type of substance use, but especially substance use with young people. So all drugs, even alcohol, tobacco, and marijuana, are illegal for people under the age of 21, and using them can result in citation and possibly arrest. Using drugs can cause changes in the brain. A person's brain is not fully developed until the age of 25, and using drugs can change how our brain cells communicate, and it can cause other unwanted health problems. Like I mentioned before, one of the long-term risks of substance use is dependency. When drugs enter the brain, they can interfere with its normal tasks and eventually lead to the brain feeling like it needs that drug to function. When you have so much elevated levels that are unnatural, when you take the drug away and we have a normal level, the brain feels out of whack, and it takes a long time for the brain to recover from that type of imbalance. And then the final impact that is the most lasting, of course, is the potential for poisoning or overdose. When too much of a drug gets into the brain, the person can lose consciousness, stop breathing, and die. So I want to kind of give you all a little bit of perspective on how much young people are actually using in our county. I know it's hard kind of thinking about all of the negative impacts that drug use can have, which are very real. However, I'm hoping that this slide can give you a little bit of peace of mind that at least in SLO County, the majority of young people are choosing to not use substances at all. And so this data is from the California Healthy Kids Survey, which is given to all public school students in the 5th, 7th, 9th, and 11th grades every other year. So we get really great longitudinal data from this survey. because it's asking the same group of students. It asks anonymous questions about young people's attitudes and experiences with school, mental health, substance use, and violence, to name a few. When thinking about what current youth substance use looks like, we are typically going to look at the past 30-day use questions. So these questions are phrased like, in the past 30 days, have you had at least one drink of alcohol? Or in the past 30 days, have you used marijuana? Or in the past 30 days, have you used a vaping device? The data is then shared back with us as a percentage of respondents by their age group. So that's what you see in these graphs here. So across the top 3 substances used by youth, alcohol, marijuana, and vaping, you can see that our county has seen an overall decline in youth substance use since 2013. And actually our 11th graders have had the most substantial drop across all age groups. The the 7th and 9th graders didn't start out as high as the 11th graders, but all 3 age groups have lowered their use. And I think this is really important information when you talk with your young person about substance use and what it looks like and your expectations and your hopes and your dreams for, for them and their choices, around substance use, that you can very confidently say, hey, you know what? I know it might seem like from things that, you hear people talking about or whatever, that all your friends are drinking or all your friends are vaping. And the data shows that that's really not the case. The majority of young people throughout San Luis Obispo County are not currently using substances. And I think that can be a really powerful message for young people when it's so important to fit in, and it's so important to feel like we are, on par with our peers and not being the outlier. So keep that in mind. Okay, so aside from dependence and addiction, one of the primary concerns we have regarding the increase in fentanyl availability is overdose, which will certainly lead to death without immediate intervention. So these data are countywide and all age groups. This is from the SLO County Coroner's Office, and these data represent the number of people who have died of overdose since 2016 here in SLO County. If you look at the graph, the top line represents all overdose deaths regardless of the type of substance that caused that overdose death. You can clearly see our county experienced a huge increase in overdose death starting in 2019 and 2020. We dropped slightly from 2021 to 2022, and we've been sitting pretty level since then. Now, I want to draw your attention to the yellow line, which accounted for the least amount of overdose deaths in 2016, and then the most starting in 2020, and has stayed as the highest since then. These are overdose deaths associated with fentanyl. Earlier, when I said fentanyl is driving the current overdose crisis, this is why. If we were to magically remove fentanyl from the equation, we would not have seen the spike in overdose deaths in 2020 and elevated numbers continuing to today. The red line in the graph is opioid overdose deaths without fentanyl, and the gray line is non-opioid involved deaths at all. In the past 5 years, opioid overdose deaths quadrupled, with fentanyl being present in 83% of them in 2023, compared to fentanyl's presence in only 18% of opioid overdose deaths in 2016. Here's another visual representation of the exponential growth of fentanyl involved in overdose deaths over the years. The yellow section in the bar graph on the very left represents non-fentanyl opioid overdose deaths, and the orange section represents fentanyl-involved overdose deaths. As you can see, from 2016 to 2023, that orange section just exploded and has grown outrageously. Because this presentation is about young people, though, I did want to share some of our age breakdowns as far as overdose deaths, because unfortunately we have experienced some young people dying of fentanyl overdose in the past several years. Young people under the age of 40 have experienced overdose deaths at rates like never before. Prior to 2019, 2020, maybe every few years, we would have a young person die of an overdose, whether it was an opioid like, fentanyl or a prescription drug, or an alcohol poisoning or overdose, something like that. But consistently since 2020, every year we've had at least one young person die of an overdose, and they've all involved fentanyl. For youth 0 to 19, every single overdose death has involved fentanyl since 2020, and that is something that we are really, really trying to see numbers decrease there. So although, the good news is that youth substance use across the board in our county has gone down, unfortunately, we've still seen an increase in youth overdose and overdose deaths because of fentanyl's potency and high likelihood of causing a fatal overdose. And so less young people are using, but the drug supply is unfortunately a lot more dangerous than it used to be. And so that's kind of why we're seeing more consequences with, less numbers of young people using. So I want to talk a little bit about what's actually happening in the body during an opioid overdose. So remember when I said opioids work by activating opioid receptors to block pain messages? They do that, but they also block other messages throughout the body, not just for pain. When molecules get into our system, they bind to things called receptors. You can think of this like a key going into a lock. When the molecule binds to the receptor, it unlocks it and tells it to either do something or not do something. In the case of opioids, they tell opioid receptors to not do something. Pain receptors are told, don't tell the brain about the pain, don't let the brain know our leg is hurting or that we have a big gash in our arm. So what happens in an overdose is that we have a lot of opioid receptors in the brainstem, which is responsible for most of our automatic functions, namely breathing. So when the brain is flooded with too many opioid molecules, all binding to receptors that are now not getting the message to make the body breathe, respiration will slow to the point of stopping. Of course, without oxygen, the body can't survive very long, and after a few minutes, the heart will stop and the person will die. One of the very best tools we have to help a person experiencing an overdose is a medication called naloxone. Perhaps you've heard about Narcan, which is actually the name brand of a nasal spray version of naloxone. How naloxone helps is that it can kick the opioid molecules out of the receptors and it will bind to them instead. Since naloxone isn't an opioid, when it unlocks the receptor, it tells the receptor to send messages to breathe. This whole process takes only 2 to 3 minutes. Naloxone is available at no cost to any member of the public. I will share more on that later. It's safe and effective, and it cannot harm someone. If you were to use it on someone who doesn't have opioids in their system, it just wouldn't do anything. There's no high effect, and having naloxone does not encourage people to use drugs. All it does is help a person regain breathing if they're experiencing an opioid overdose. Some signs to look out for that indicate a person's having an overdose are small, constricted pinpoint pupils, the person falling asleep or losing consciousness or maybe kind of coming in and out of consciousness. They'll have slow, shallow breathing. They might be making choking or gurgling sounds. And they could have pale blue or cold skin and blue lips or nails. All the things that you would associate with a person not breathing well. The primary sign of trouble is that the person is unresponsive and they need medical attention right away. Now we're going to go over the 4 steps to effectively respond to an opioid overdose. This training is a demonstration of how to respond to an opioid overdose, not any other type of medical emergency. Always call 911 in case of suspected overdose or other medical emergency. If you notice someone with one or more of those signs of overdose we just talked about, your first step, check for a response. You want to call their name, shake their shoulder, or even do a sternum rub. To do that, you're going to make your hand into a fist, rub your knuckles hard on the person's sternum, which is that bone right on their chest bone, right there in the middle. If they're not responding, your last ditch could say something like, "Hey, I'm gonna Narcan you." If a person is high and maybe they're just ignoring you because they're enjoying their high and they'd like you to go away, they will have a response if you say, "I'm going to Narcan you." If they still have no response, call 911 right away. When the operator answers, you're going to tell them where you are and there's a person who's unresponsive and needs an ambulance. The 911 dispatcher is probably going to ask you a bunch of questions. Answer all these questions by telling the operator what you see. If you don't know, you can say, "I don't know." You just want to basically be the eyes for the responders that are coming to help. So EMS is on its way. The third step is to give the person naloxone. You want to help get that person laying down on their back if they're not already laying down. You want to tilt their head back a little bit. You're going to remove the naloxone from its package and place the device in one nostril. You can look at the picture on the screen to kind of help see what that would look like. But the device looks like just kind of any other nasal spray that you're probably familiar with. So you're going to place the device into one nostril. Using your thumb, you're going to press down on the red plunger completely to dispense all the medication. The nasal spray devices of Narcan or the generic naloxone are pre-dosed, and you want to give the person the whole dose. Once naloxone is administered, you want to give rescue breaths if you feel comfortable doing so. All of our naloxone kits come with a disposable one-way valve face shield that you can use to prevent any kind of germ transfer from you to the victim and from the victim to you. To give rescue breaths, you want to tilt the person's head back, pinch their nose, and give one breath every 10 to 15 seconds. You want to make sure you see their chest rise and fall between breaths. This ensures that air is getting into the lungs. If it's hard to remember the numbers, try to remember you take a slow breath, you would give them a slow breath. Watch their chest, make sure it goes in their lungs. You take a breath, give them a breath. This is just to help supply oxygen to their brain while we wait for the naloxone to kick in and do its job. After about 2 to 3 minutes, that naloxone should be working. If the person hasn't had any kind of response, meaning they haven't, woken up, they haven't started breathing again, etc., you can give another dose of naloxone in the person's other nostril and then continue with rescue breaths. You can continue this cycle of naloxone and rescue breaths until EMS arrives. If you run out of naloxone, EMS isn't there yet, you can continue with rescue breaths until they arrive or until you get tired out. You can switch this off if another person is with you helping. But important that you're staying with that person. So hopefully the person will have a positive response from the naloxone. Once they have a positive response, you want to place them in what's called the recovery position, as shown on the screen. To do so, you're going to put one of their arms up straight over their head. You're going to grab the other shoulder, and you're going to roll them onto their side. And you want to bend their top leg over to support this position so they kind of stabilize. You can tuck the hand from their top arm right under their chin to support their head and their face. This position maintains an open airway. It prevents them from aspirating on vomit if they get sick, and it helps relieve pressure on their lungs. It's just a nice calm position and a way for their body to not have any additional stressors put on it. After an overdose, a person is going to likely be confused, disoriented. They likely aren't going to remember overdosing. You can help by speaking in a calm voice. You could say something like, "Hi, my name is Jen. You're at Behavioral Health. You stopped breathing. I gave you some naloxone and I called 911. We're here to help you." Stay sitting or laying down to help your body recover. You want to help keep the person as calm as possible so that they so that they feel safe and that they can come out of their overdose in kind of the most positive way possible. One of the important things that I really want all people to understand are the laws that we have in California that protect you as the helper and also the overdose victim. So we have two really important laws in the state of California that are related to carrying naloxone and helping somebody experiencing an overdose. The first is AB 472. This is also called the 911 Good Samaritan Law. And this law states that a person cannot be arrested or cited for being under the influence or having a personal-sized amount of a controlled substance if 911 is called for a medical emergency like an overdose. I think most people know that when you call 911 and say you need an ambulance, you're probably going to get police, fire, and ambulance. Now, in the majority of cases, if somebody is having an opioid overdose, they likely did something illegal to get themselves in that position. And we do not want people to fear calling 911 or neglect to get somebody help for fear of getting them in legal trouble. We want to save people's lives. And the state of California wants people to not die of overdose. And so that's why we have this law. So you're going to call 911, police are going to show up. They are not going to arrest the overdose victim or give them a citation or give you a citation for the person being under the influence or for even having kind of a personal-sized amount of an illegal substance on them. Now, if they arrive and it's clear, they see out in the open that there's drugs packaged for sale, or it comes out that the person experiencing an overdose, ingested the drugs against their will, or the person is driving under the influence, or somebody's driving under the influence to get the person to the hospital. These are things that that can still be, cited for. But simply the person being under the influence or having a personal-sized amount of a controlled substance is not going to get them in trouble if the call is, hey, this person needs help, they're unresponsive, they need medics. So that's really important to, I think, for everybody to know. We want people to call 911. We want people to get the medical help that they need so that they're not dying unnecessarily. As a side note, because this is a presentation focused on youth and young people, there is a sister law to this 911 Good Samaritan law. It's called Shelby's Law, and it says pretty much the exact same thing as this, but it pertains to minors under the age of 21 and alcohol. If we have a bunch of teenagers and they're drinking and somebody becomes unresponsive for alcohol poisoning, they've had too much alcohol in their system and they're not responsive, we want people to call 911. The kids are not going to get in trouble. We want to get that young person to the hospital so that they can come out of that overdose safely. The next law that really pertains kind of more to those of us that have a desire to have and carry naloxone to help somebody else is AB 635. This is a statewide law that says that a non-medical person can carry and use naloxone in good faith to help a person experiencing an overdose. This helping person cannot be held civilly or criminally liable for their actions to try and help a person by administering naloxone. You cannot get arrested, you cannot get sued, you cannot get in trouble at your work, etc., to have and carry naloxone and use it to help a person. We really want people to feel empowered and safe and secure knowing that, one, naloxone is legal for anybody to have and use. It is safe. You cannot harm somebody with it, and you're not going to get in trouble for trying to help somebody. So now that hopefully everybody feels, comfortable with what naloxone is and how you can use it to help somebody, I want to encourage you to think about getting naloxone for yourself, for your household, or for a friend or loved one. Naloxone's now over the counter. It's available to all members of the community. At the end of this training, you will have an option to request a free naloxone kit. So that's a really easy way for you to access it. There's also several locations in SLO County that offer free confidential access to naloxone. So at any county drug and alcohol services or mental health clinic, anyone can walk into the lobby and ask for a Narcan kit. So Bringer's Syringe Exchange Program offers free kits. You just have to call them at this number. Cal Poly students and staff can get a kit from Cal Poly Health and Counseling Services. Dignity Health Emergency Departments offer it. Capsoza Center, their clinics in SLO and AG have free kits as well. The coalition organizes a free mail order site called naloxonowslo.org. It has online training and resources, and you can have a free kit mailed to you within the county. And then finally, pharmacies are also a place where folks can get access to naloxone. Because it's over the counter, it's just on the shelf with all the other medications at, CVS or Rite Aid or Walgreens or whatever pharmacy you choose to go to. If you go to a pharmacy, the retail cost is around $50 a box. But again, all of the other resources listed provide free and confidential access. So lots of great options in our county for those resources. So now I want to jump into how you might recognize risk factors of use. And so we've put together some objective signs and symptoms of what it looks like if a person's under the influence, or maybe some things to look out for that might indicate that a person's been using. So if you have some concerns, you can look for some of these common signs. And so one thing that you might notice is smells associated with different substances, like a skunk smell of cannabis, or kind of fruity, sugary smells for vaping, for example. Noticing a person's eyes can be an indication of use. If their pupils seem too large or too small for the amount of light in the room, or if they're bloodshot and watery, that might indicate that they're under the influence of something. Other things like motor skills, behaviors, and speech might be too fast, too slow, jittery, or just kind of off. You might notice different objects around, like lighters, vapor smoking devices, small baggies or wrappers, rolled up paper, items to cover up some of these symptoms like gum, mints, eye drops, etc. Many of these signs and symptoms of substance use can also be from other causes. So if you notice some of these things, you probably don't want to jump to the conclusion that, oh my gosh, my kiddo is under the influence and they're using all these things. But it might be an indication that, hey, you should maybe have a conversation or start kind of paying attention, or maybe ask some questions that might give me more information about what's going on with them. The key is to look for things that are out of the ordinary for the person or your child. If you think something's off with your kiddo, talk to them about what you're noticing. If you're noticing other risk factors, such as personality or friend changes, hygiene or appearance changes, class performance changes, consider checking in with them and possibly connecting with counseling resources for some support. So, how do you go about talking with your child or young person about this? We often feel uncomfortable with these tricky topics, so I'm going to share a few research-based tips that can help. And this can be for any tricky topic, not just substance use. Obviously, for this presentation, we'll focus on examples around talking about substance use. So the first tip is keep conversations frequent and casual. Nothing makes somebody more uncomfortable than the phrase, sit down, we need to talk about whatever. So you might want to start with some small bits of information built into just your regular everyday conversation. Maybe you're driving in the car, you could say something like, oh, hey, I saw this news story about high schoolers vaping in the bathrooms. Have you heard about that happening? You want to ask some questions and involve everyone in the conversation. You don't want it to come off as you're lecturing your young person. You want to have a back and forth conversation with them. You can share something you've heard or learned and ask what they think about it. The next tip is to have clear expectations. It is important our kids know what we expect of them and what they can expect of us. Hey, are you excited to go over to Susie's house after the game this Friday? I bet you guys are going to have a great time. I know sometimes young people might try to drink alcohol or try vapes at, social events or when you're with your friends. I want you to know that isn't okay in our house. If that's going on at the places you're hanging out, I really do expect you'll choose not to drink or vape. I will always be here for you, and I want you to know you're not going to be in trouble for telling the truth. Be consistent with your expectations and try to avoid value-based language. Saying things like, well, good kids don't drink, can set up your kiddo to hide the truth if they made a mistake. A third tip is focus your conversations on teamwork. Make sure your kids know you're on the same team and that you care about them. Keeping open communication leaves room for them to come to you if something's going on and they know you're not going to judge them. You want to work together to make a game plan. Help think at times they might be faced with a decision about drugs or alcohol and come up with how to say no or how to call or text you to discreetly let you know they want to leave. Finally, remember that the majority of young people do actually care what you think. 80% of young people say their parents are the leading influence on their decision to use or not. So make sure that you're part of that conversation. Make sure that they hear your voice when you're not around, when they're faced with these decisions in different situations, because we all know every young person is going to face this choice one day or another. So really any age is a good age to start incorporating these conversations into your daily life. Of course, what you say and how you say it is going to change with how old your kiddo is. So I wanted to share some age-appropriate examples or ways to share information about drugs and alcohol at different ages. So some examples for younger kids, I might say something like, drugs and alcohol are things some people put in their bodies that change how they feel or act. Or you could say, some are okay to use when people are old enough, like a grown-up drinking alcohol or your parent or doctor giving you a medicine. Drugs and alcohol can sometimes hurt our brain or body, so you never want to eat or drink something without your parents knowing about it. So this is something I would say for, kindergartners through maybe second, third graders. For maybe older kids, third, fourth graders to maybe fifth or sixth graders, I would say something like, drugs and alcohol can make people act differently than normal. You might hear people say the words drunk or intoxicated when this happens. I want to give young people the kind of the terms that they're going to hear about so they can connect those things with what you're talking about to what they might hear, in the real world. Alcohol and some drugs are legal for people over 21. Others aren't legal, and a person can get arrested if they use them. We want them to know what the consequences are. Drugs and alcohol sometimes trick our brains into thinking we need to use them, and it makes it hard to stop using them. And then finally, for preteens and teenagers, you can give more information. So drugs and alcohol change how our brain works and make it hard to think clearly. Sometimes it causes people to do things that are dangerous, like drive under the influence. Illegal drugs are dangerous because you don't know what's really in them. Some are dangerous enough to make a person stop breathing and die. That is called an overdose. People who are addicted to using drugs or alcohol have a hard time quitting and will often still use, even if they get arrested or hurt. So each of these things kind of builds on one another. So if we start talking with our young people early, then it's like each thing is kind of a building block, and so they can kind of start to learn more information. You don't want to have your kiddo have no information about this stuff until they're preteens and then like, whoa, what is all this, right? We want to prepare them a little bit out of time for these really serious topics that can be tricky even for adults to navigate. So hopefully that is kind of a helpful way to help you as parents and mentors feel confident in talking about these topics with young people. So finally, I wanted to share some resources that I think are really helpful. Some of these are local, some are national websites, some are, text lines. I encourage you to check these out if you're interested in learning more. Kind of the bottom right under the Friday Night Live website, which is an amazing program at all of our middle and high schools. Every student is welcome to join that club at their school. On the website, you can see how to get connected. But these numbers down here on the right, those are all different hotlines to help connect people to resources and find support if what you're needing is more than information, but actually getting into maybe a little bit of early intervention and treatment services. So that is there. I hope that it's helpful for you to use. And so that's the end of the presentation. Thank you so much for joining this training. I hope it was helpful both for parenting and mentoring journeys. Please click the survey link in the screen so you can share your thoughts and any questions you may have. You're welcome to call or email me with questions or comments as well. My email and phone number are there on the screen. If you'd like to receive a free naloxone kit, make sure you click that survey and you can request one in there, and we'll get one to you as soon as we can. Again, thank you so much, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.